This podcast is part of the Some Buddies Network. You're never alone when you've got some buddies.
Hello again, everyone. Welcome back to the Best Darn Diddly Review Show. This is a weekly podcast for anyone who loves The Simpsons or ever has loved The Simpsons, hosted by two dudes that grew up on The Simpsons. My name is Miles, better known as Mr. Most Days Off, and today we are going undercover? No, that's not right. We're covering grade school.
Going undercovers.
Yeah, that's better.
Ooh.
Going undercovers. I like that. We're covering Grade School Confidential today, and of course, joining me under the covers as always, your co-host with the most, Richie the Whiz Kid. How are you today, Rich?
I'm feeling kind of naughty today, Miles, with this episode. I mean, we're going to get to some down and dirty, or maybe not because, 44 years and none of the
Oh, he shared too much. I'm never going to be able to look at you the same again, Rich.
Well, clearly we have some things to talk about, so I better go ahead and throw it back in your general direction. The man, the myth, the math magician himself. It is Miles.
It's a magical 4.
Make those remainders disappear.
Well, again, today we are covering the episode Grade School Confidential, which originally aired on April 6, 1997, though, according to the commentary, which on this episode featured Bill Oakley, Josh Weinstein, Matt Groening, the director Susie Dieter, Rachel Pulido, and in the background, it was Bill Oakley's and Rachel Pulido's infant baby, which answers a whole lot of questions. First of all, I did not realize that Bill Oakley was married to a writer for The Simpsons. That's interesting to know. Rachel Pulido and Bill Oakley, I believe, actually, at this time, this was during the commentary, they, again, had their infant, which also, to me, explained why Bill Oakley has not been on nearly as many of the commentaries this season as he had been in the past, and I think that might largely be to the fact that he's taking care of his kid.
So, we're learning a lot of secrets in this episode, Miles.
But I did bring all that up to say this episode debuted in April of 97, but according to that commentary, the idea of Principal Skinner and Edna Krabappel getting together, hooking up, has actually been floating around since the Mike Reese and Al Jean era, and they just never pulled the trigger on it and never really had the reason to get them together until now. And they had Rachel Pulido, who wanted to write the script, and it came out to this, which I think came out to be a really good episode that we have a lot to talk about, like you said.
Yeah, I always enjoyed this episode. I thought it was interesting when it first came out, and, as we'll get into at the very end, it kind of doesn't necessarily do a full reset, so I always enjoyed. What is it with Skinner and not full resets? I don't know. We'll figure that out.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually. This one doesn't do the classic Simpsons reset. It does leave just a little lingering trail going forward into the future. But backing all the way up to the beginning, this one once again does not feature a chalk gag like many of the Bill Oakley and Josh Weinstein episodes. It does, however, have the couch gag, which in this case is the Simpsons in the form of little blue balloons floating through the living room. They all land on the couch, and then they pop one by one. We open up officially on the Springfield Elementary School, where it's actually announcements coming over the loudspeaker. Good morning, Springfield Elementary. Over the intercom, we can hear Skinner saying, "Finally, the bake sale to raise money for the car wash has been canceled due to confusion." Well, that concludes this morning's announcements. I'm Seymour Skinner, and stand by to resume learning in 5, 4, 3, 2.
Oh, it's hard enough to keep the kids awake without you, Seymour.
And Mrs. Krabappel is seen annoyed by the principal's announcement. The entire class is sleeping, so she goes to her contraband drawer and finds some firecrackers to put a little pep in everyone's step.
I actually wrote a note on this section going, I wonder if these are all confiscated from Bart, or if maybe Edna was a little bit like Bart when she was a child. Like, she always seems to know exactly what the heck Bart is up to.
That would make sense why she's like 2 steps ahead of him so often.
Yeah, not just that she's seen it so many times, but that maybe she did a lot of it. Yeah. And then I felt bad because at one point in the episode she talks about when she was a kid for a split second.
Oh yeah, that's right. Well, we don't really know the origins of the fireworks, but they do the trick. They wake everybody up, and that actually leads Martin to announce that he has an additional announcement.
Can it wait until I retire?
I want one and all to join me in celebrating the anniversary of my portentous birth. And he goes around the room handing out invitations, but every time he gives one to Nelson, he's like, "Here you are, Nelson."
A birthday party.
And he throws it to the floor where Martin over and over again keeps picking up the invitation. "Oh, here you are, Nelson." "Oh, here you are, Nelson." And he just keeps repeating it. Very funny.
I said...
We cut from Springfield Elementary School over to the Simpsons' home, where we see another instance of Homer in a moment of really good parenting, in my opinion, because he's actually attempting to play with his son and his son's nerdy friend, who he constantly shows annoyance towards, by pretending that they're in a rocket as he pulls them around in a wagon while he's on a bike. Now, this is confusing in a few ways just because it's weird to see Homer both being a very active father and also getting exercise.
And able to attach a wagon to a bike.
And able to do a pretty good Nixon impression.
You know, maybe this is all part of his plan to get Milhouse to leave.
He's trying to annoy Milhouse away?
Yes.
That's funny.
Yes. It would line up, I mean...
He's going way into it. "All right, men, get ready to blast off." And as he starts slowly pedaling, "Woo! We're in orbit now. What's that? A call from the president? Hello? Oh, yes, let me just say this about that. Okay, Mr. President."
Bart, this is boring.
And they decide that instead of playing NASA with Homer, they would actually be better off going to Martin's party, which they're reluctant to do, but when they see the other options, they quickly jump out of the wagon and take off.
And it's a good thing they did, Miles.
I don't know. If they're seen there, it could definitely take them down a notch on the social standing, Richie.
We're what now, 3?
3.5. We get beat up, but we get an explanation.
Again, we talked about this pre-show, but I don't know. Now I'm thinking meow meow beans again. But no, I'm glad that they decided to do that because, you know, Homer's going to get into a little tangled situation in a second.
That's true. Homer loses control and ends up driving into the hammock where he is plucked from the bike. Or, I'm sorry, it was the lawnmower, not the bike. That makes way more sense.
Oh,
I'm tripping out.
Yeah.
It wasn't listed.
I can't picture Homer on a bike.
I also was like, even as I'm saying that, I'm like, that doesn't sound right. He's on a riding lawnmower, which makes a hell of a lot more sense. But he somehow drives right into the hammock.
That's some dangerous crabgrass over there.
We cut over from the Simpsons' yard to Martin's yard, where we see that they have gone all out for Martin's birthday. There's a lot of people, a bounce house, lots of fun activities. And some of the guests, actually, that they have listed on IMDb include Sherry and Terry, Edna, Ralph, Richard, Lisa, Bart, Wendell, Milhouse, Janie, Lewis, Nelson, Seymour, and Mrs. Skinner, who we'll see here momentarily. I have no idea who Richard is, honestly.
He's one of the, like, rich-looking kids. He was usually with Bart in the earlier seasons when they're, like, spray painting on the side of the school.
Ah, okay.
He's usually got a little blazer jacket thing on over his gear, I think.
Well, at the party, we see Bart is helping himself to a refreshment, but there's no ice, except for the ice sculpture of Martin that they have apparently purchased for his birthday. And Bart actually breaks off several of Martin's fingers to refresh his drink.
Smart.
And then Mrs. Krabappel walks up and gives Bart a little bit of a scare.
Hi, Bart.
Mrs. K, hey, it's Saturday. Your powers are useless against me.
Relax. I'm just here to have fun like everybody else, so don't think of me as your teacher.
Okay, so...
Mm-hmm.
And they both just kind of sit there and sip their punch awkwardly in silence until Bart's like, excuse me, but he walks like 10 feet away and just stands nearby, still drinking his punch, just far enough away from Krabappel that it's not as awkward that they're not talking. It's obviously uncomfortable for both of them and a bit of a downer for Edna. Across the party, we see that another feature act of this birthday extravaganza is a magician that's doing some tricks for the kids. He's dressed as a wizard, and he's got a chalkboard, but when they suggest that they do something like, saw somebody in half or something, we see that this wizard, first of all, looks a hell of a lot like one Bill Gates, and points out that he's more of a math-magician.
I'm not that kind of magician. I'm more of a math-magician.
And everybody except for Lisa is clearly sad about this, but Lisa is just pointing out the flaws in his math.
Watch as I make this remainder disappear.
But 7 goes into 28 4 times.
This is a magic 7.
And once again, at another point in the yard, we see Skinner and Krabappel are actually sitting at a picnic table. Really, Edna's sitting at a picnic table, and Skinner, in a very socially clueless sort of way, is like, mind if I sit down?
It's a free country.
I don't follow you.
Oh, just sit down, Seymour. It might be nice to talk to a grown-up for a change.
Well, this party is certainly a break in my routine. Normally I spend my Saturdays carefully laying out my clothes for the following week. Then I stroll down to the car wash to see if Gus is there.
Oh, yeah, you gotta keep busy. I collect matchbooks from glamorous nightclubs. It's amazing if you just write to them and ask nicely.
And you can tell that neither person is very invested in this conversation. They both seem like they're just kind of bored in general. And Skinner actually kind of calls it out. He says to Edna, "Is this how you imagined your life?"
Well, yes, but then again, I was a very depressed child.
And they cheers to poor decisions. And just then, we actually see Mrs. Skinner poke her face up over the top of the fence that's nearby the table they're sitting at.
After it's through, you see just her eye through an eye hole in the fence first.
You're right, yeah, we can see it's kind of funny. It's like peering through this hole in the fence, and she pops up over the fence, and according to IMDb, when she's sitting there on the fence, she's in the classic Kilroy was here pose, which is actually, I did some research on this. It's popular military graffiti, especially from Vietnam, is what I was able to discover. And there's other versions of it in other countries, but it all has like a very simple cartoon character who happens to be peering over a fence with their hands holding either side, just like Mrs. Skinner was doing here in this moment.
Which is, very uncomfortable in real life. Just FYI. Seymour! I told you not to play in the neighbor's yard!
It's a party, Mother. I was invited.
Well, then I must have been invited, too.
And we see her quickly jumps off the fence, and she's clearly running around to come join the party, and immediately Skinner looks to Edna and is like, "Please help me." They look around the yard, and they see Wendell, I believe it was, coming out of a little pink playhouse, and Edna gets the idea that they could hide in there.
I want to bring up real quick before we continue on that we're starting to see Ralph have a very, very difficult birthday party, even though it's not his birthday party, and it all seems to be involving horses too.
He's terrified as he's riding a pony across the yard, screaming. I think it was a donkey, but
yeah.
Whatever. Either way, he's riding something, and he's like,
"Wow!" And then he'll have a little bit of an issue here. Pinning the tail on the donkey after the Milhouse situation.
Well, Bart is coaching Milhouse on pin the tail on the donkey, but he's clearly guiding his blindfolded friend straight into a cactus.
And there's one point where Ralph will actually pin the tail, but like completely off the donkey. And then he'll start crying again. And I just felt bad for Ralph in this birthday scene.
Yeah, he's not having a great day. Definitely not his finest moments. And that's saying something for Ralph. But also not having his finest moment is Milhouse, because he very clearly looks like he's starting to have stomach distress, and he's trying to make it to a bathroom, but with the blindfold and the confusion and everything, he ends up running into the bounce house by mistake, and immediately you just hear the sounds of Milhouse getting sick, followed by the disgust and screaming of the fleeing children who are now leaving the bounce house and also getting sick themselves. And according to the commentary, this whole scene just came from the very real fear that a lot of the writers have of this, especially regarding children, where it seems like when you get kids in this situation, it can be a complete and total chain reaction nightmare. And if you're adverse to vomit, essentially, having kids is kind of the worst.
Well, to be fair, Martin's dad did tell his wife that they should have served cake instead of oysters.
Martin's just worried about his reputation, and to be fair, Nelson gives him a punch in the stomach for his troubles.
Ha ha! Oh!
But then immediately collapses because he's also sick. And something about Nelson eating oysters makes me happy. I'm not sure why. We see ambulance after ambulance, stretcher after stretcher, loading kids out of this party, and we actually see Lisa being stretchered off, and Lisa asks Bart, who's standing around casually, "Hey, how come you're not sick?"
I gave my oysters to the cat.
And we see beside them the cat is clearly not having a great day either, but Bart immediately gets suspicious himself. "Hey, why'd you eat them? I thought you were a vegetarian."
I didn't. I just wanted to leave. She's saying that like with the paramedics clearly being able to hear her.
And then she lays back down and starts to sell it again, like WWE style. Oh.
Even I get that joke.
There you go. However, all of this chaos and confusion worked out very serendipitously for one Springfield couple, or I guess soon-to-be couple, because...
Way to freaking give it away, Miles.
I'm so sorry. Some people may not have watched The Simpsons before. I apologize. Seymour Skinner and Edna Krabappel are having a tea party in the playhouse in the backyard.
More tea, Edna?
What kind of little boy has a tea set?
I think we both know the answer to that. A lucky boy!
You know, Seymour, you have an innocence about you that can be quite charming.
Oh? Well, I've always admired your tart honesty and ability to be personally offended by broad social trends.
Oh, really?
Very much. And your laugh.
You mean, ha!
Mm-hmm. That's the one that makes me feel... Oh, boy.
They actually hold hands here, and you can see Skinner is definitely having a reaction.
Do you have a, breath mint that I could borrow?
I have some menthol cigarettes.
Oh, the heck with it. Come here, Miles.
And they lean over the table and they start kissing passionately. And we actually hear, like, romantic, like, string music start to swell in the background. But as it pans out in typical Simpsons fashion, a lot of times we go from the micro view to the macro view and reveal something else is in play here. And in this case, as the camera zooms out, we see that Bart is the one that's sitting there in bewilderment as he stares through the playhouse window, seeing his teacher and his principal very much playing an aggressive game of tonsil hockey, to put it mildly.
Is that mildly?
I think that's mild. That's PG.
It's not mild, it's Miles.
Either way, it is going to take us to the end of our very first act. We still have 2 more to go, and that was a short one. That act comes at the 5.5 minute mark, meaning that it is unproportionately shorter than the rest of the acts to come. But we will still go ahead and take a very quick break and be right back with Act 2 of Grade School Confidential.
Hey guys, I'm here to talk about a serious problem today. One that can affect us all. But it's also a problem that can be fixed with everyone's help. I'm Richie the Whiz Kid, and I'm talking about podcasts. So many podcasts in the Somebodies Network need your help. They are being malnourished. Some are living in terribly harsh conditions, and some are Canadian. But with your help, a corner can be turned for these poor podcasts, especially in regards to Best Darn Diddly. You can go to popthreads.com and use the code Simpsons at checkout. Or you can buy Best Darn Diddly merch at tpublic.com. Most importantly, you can go to patreon.com/bestdarndiddly to donate now for as little as $1 a month. For less than 4 cents a day, you can bring a smile to these poor podcasters' faces. So let's work together to end the poverty of these podcasts. Let's be honest, you were probably just going to get a Krusty Burger with that dollar anyways. Cut to the pictures of starving podcasts.
We open up our second act with Seymour Skinner and Edna Krabappel side by side in the cafeteria, clearly having feelings for each other, I think, to say the least. I do want to have a quick side note here, mostly from the commentary, but something that is very glaringly obvious in 2019 as you rewatch this episode is in this scene, Edna is smoking a cigarette in the school cafeteria, which by today's standards seems absolutely absurd. But again, this was 1997, so it was a little bit of a different time.
I know. I'm going to say, Miles, I don't think I ever would have seen this in my school cafeteria in the 90s. Like, I still think this is
I would agree with that. I would agree with that, but a lot of this joke did come from some real life things that were happening in the Simpsons rewrite room at this time. Richie, have you ever heard by a fella of the name John Swartzwelder?
That sounds made up.
He is a writer for The Simpsons, but unfortunately he was not available for this commentary track for some reason. But the rest of the people on the track did talk about the fact that smoking in the rewrite room used to be a thing in The Simpsons writing staff's office. But over time, it eventually got to the point that John Swartzwelder was the only writer who was taking advantage of this rule, essentially. So in other words, nobody else smoked, Swartzwelder did, and he would smoke up a storm in the rewrite room. It became problematic over time, and they kept trying to find solutions like smokeless ashtrays and other gimmicks of that nature. Swartzwelder didn't like any of them. So when they did finally just outright ban smoking in the writing room, Swartzwelder stopped coming into work.
Ooh.
Now, he didn't stop doing his work, he just stopped coming into the office to do it, and instead he chose to go to a local coffee shop to continue his rewriting process. So they would just send him the scripts, he would still do the work, he would send it back, and he could smoke in his booth of choice at this coffee shop. Until the state of California itself banned smoking in public, which further pissed Swartzwelder off, this time as a man who wanted to smoke his cigarettes while he writes his Simpsons or rewrites other people's scripts. He bought the booth from the coffee shop where he liked to go and write and took it to his own home where he continued doing rewrites from the booth of choice, now firmly planted where the government of California could not tell him not to smoke.
I honestly enjoy that story. Like, don't picture him being a frugal man, so he probably had a lot of Simpsons money, a lot of money on retainer, or whatever, however you want to put it. And so...
See, I do see him being frugal, even though, like, he makes probably a good amount of money doing what he does. I see him being the type where, he has his, axe.
Yeah, I meant he is a frugal man. I'm sorry, I worded that incorrectly.
Yeah, I envision this dude as the type that, like, builds everything. He's a Ron Swanson type. He
yes.
probably has gold buried in his backyard.
Yes. So this is, like, the one expense that he will use for, like, the next 10 years.
So, literally only 10, because that's how long of a life you're gonna have if you keep smoking, buddy. But, at the same time... I do really appreciate his dedication to his craft and his hobbies or habits. I don't know what you want to call it.
I mean, if that's what it takes for him to mentally get to that point, then let's do it.
Sure. Yeah,
I meant to say mentally get to that point.
Mentally, that's great. But yeah, I really enjoyed that story as well, and I just get a lot of joy about thinking about John Swartzwelder sitting in his booth that he bought from his coffee shop that wouldn't let him smoke anymore. Oh, good times. But what isn't great for Edna and Seymour is they can overhear Bart in the background in the cafeteria talking about what went down at the party, and in typical Bart fashion, he's making a big scene about it. I mean, like, he's got a crowd gathered. You are never going to guess what I saw at Martin's party after you guys left. You know that playhouse? Well,
Good gravy!
And you hear the cafeteria employee from the background, "Oh, thank you. It's just brown and water." What? Not brown food coloring, just brown.
Brown could be a fruit.
You see in the background here, as we have Bart telling everybody in the foreground, behind them you still see Edna and Seymour takes off in a sprint, and right before it's revealed right before Bart reveals what he's about to, Skinner actually comes on over the loudspeaker once again, demanding that Bart comes to the principal's office.
The fastest you will ever see that man.
We see Edna and Seymour on one side of the desk, sitting across from Bart, and they're taking this very seriously. Skinner says, "Now, Bart, son, I don't know what you think you saw, but, let me assure you..."
What Principal Skinner means to say, Bart, is that sometimes a little boy's imagination can run away with him.
But Bart is not having this. That's the best you can do? I mean, you could have at least said that you were giving her CPR or rehearsing a play.
Is it too late to say that?
Mm-hmm.
Well, just so we're just a little concerned that if people were to find out that a principal were dating a teacher, they might see it as a conflict of interest.
And there are just those who might try to use it against us for their own advantage.
Like me, for one.
And immediately Seymour's like you for Bart? If life has taught me one lesson repeatedly, it's to know when I'm beaten. Let's talk a deal.
I don't know if you're going to keep this in here, Miles, but I actually like the little faux pas in Seymour's name when you almost called him Scheme-more, which he's kind of trying to do at this exact moment.
Yeah, it's true. I like it too.
We're keeping it.
So the deal making comes to the permanent record room, which is just funny in itself. Like, as kids, there's this idea that there's a permanent record and that it's going to haunt you for the rest of your life and that it's got all these terrible things, or anytime that you've ever done anything wrong, they're going to know about it. And of course, it's funny as an adult because you realize that pretty much nothing that you did in school really matters in terms of, as long as you graduate, honestly, for the most part, it doesn't really matter. And especially in elementary school and middle school, it's like nobody's going to go and look at what type of kid you were ever.
Well, but you did kind of think that age, though. You did kind of think that this might exist at one point in time when you saw this episode.
Yeah, every kid ever has this feeling like it's going to haunt, like you're in 5th grade and you're like, oh my god, this is going to haunt me for the rest of my life, because at that point, you don't have the, like, life experience or wisdom to realize how very little that happens in 5th grade really matters. Or 4th grade in Bart's case, but my example being any elementary school age kid.
Exactly, yeah. I don't even remember what I did in 5th or 4th grade.
Right. I know I wasn't popular, and I was probably fat.
All I know is I had straight A's, and I was probably more of a Martin.
I also had straight A's, but I already said I wasn't popular, so I felt like that was covered. So, they really, like, hammer this joke in with how serious they take this scene, because they've got this entire vault room that would never exist in an elementary school, especially Springfield Elementary School. It's much nicer than the rest of the facility. And Mrs. Krabappel is like, as you know, Bart, your permanent record will one day disqualify you from all but the hottest and noisiest jobs.
Which I think he would want. What do you say?
Doesn't he like dream of being like a construction manager or something like that?
Knocking stuff over or blowing stuff up. What do you say, son? You keep our secret, and some other student can inherit your gloomy, windblown future.
And we see they pick up Milhouse's file, and they basically slap a sticker putting Bart's name over Milhouse's file, or Milhouse's name over Bart's file, excuse me. And Bart's immediately like, deal.
This is a great day for forbidden love. I do need to bring up a terrible Richie story here.
Cool.
I mean, Miles, you know I already am incredibly blind, but this, oh my gosh, this scene just completely killed me, and it caused me to go down a terrible dark spiral, because when they posted Milhouse's name over Bart's record, I went, Milhouse only has one L in his name? And I go, I literally just went through this a few days ago. For those of you who don't know, Richie is an avid video game player. And I recently started making a draft class on the new Madden game of Simpson characters. And I had just added Milhouse into a Fantasy Simpsons draft that you can actually download off your PlayStation if you have it. You can search for Simpsons on your draft class in fantasy mode and download my actual draft class. I was making Milhouse. I think I made him... I don't remember what I made him. But download it and you guys tell me. But I was researching how many L's is in Milhouse's name just to be... there's times where I think I know and I just want to be precise.
I don't know that Googling that counts as research for what it's worth. Go ahead.
I looked at tons of different things to figure it out, though. Like, I don't ever trust one thing. And
it's like the Diddley versus Diddley review or debate that we talked about recently.
Yes.
With Denise and Karma from last week.
Well, we didn't talk about it on air.
Damn it. All right. Well, we did talk about it off there, apparently.
But I swear that I saw through every website that there were two L's in Milhouse's name. But I also had to like blatantly glare at the screen and bring it right up to my face, because I'm starting to have this issue, especially getting older and being blind, Miles, where if I see an ILL followed by like an H, I can't tell if there's one L or two. I legitimately can't, and it bugs the shit out of me. But I could swear I saw two L's followed by an H. So I thought the Simpsons writers fucked up here, because I thought there was only one L here but two everywhere else. And then I thought, Richie, you're probably just being blind. And after I got...
I think you are being just blind.
After I got done watching the episode, I brought those same websites back up and went, holy crap, it looks like there's only one L now, but I still can't quite sure, but now the Simpsons have leaned me in the other direction, so I had to go back into my draft class, fix it, and re-upload it, so it should be correct now. Milhouse only has one L, end of rant.
So all of that work and all of that rant, and I just have to know, how many downloads does that roster have at this time?
One. It has one. My other...
Totally worth it.
My other much more popular draft class I have with Avenger characters, or Marvel characters in general, I think I'm up over like... I can't remember if it's over 350 or 450 downloads right now. That one's getting played like crazy.
If only it plugged our podcast. But either way, moving forward on this one, we see that now with Bart, the only wrench in this plan's, or the only even possible wrench in this plan for Seymour and Edna, it allows them a little bit of freedom. Seymour and Edna are actually having a little bit of a date, I guess you would call it. They're having a very nice dessert. Skinner has to ask Edna what she calls it.
Applesauce.
Oh, of course. I'm sorry. I don't get out to restaurants much.
That's okay. I don't entertain much. Usually it's just soup for one, salad for one, wine for three.
I always thought I'd fall for a woman just like Mother, even though I didn't want to. And now that I haven't, I've discovered what true happiness can be, Edna.
Seymour, swallow that applesauce and kiss me.
I'm afraid I already swallowed it while you were talking. And immediately this disrupts into, once again, passionate making out, which probably goes on for more. Maybe, I don't know. It's hard to tell at this point. I do really like, for whatever reason, during this candle-lit romantic dinner that they were having, the candle that was lit was actually a Charlie Brown candle, but his head had been entirely melted off. So it was like a flat cut off Charlie Brown head on top with his classic yellow and black stripe shirt on bottom.
And it must have been a long session because his head is literally the biggest part of his body.
That's true. It takes quite a while to burn down, I guess. The next day at school, we can see that Seymour and Edna are in particularly good moods. Even for Seymour, who's very straight-laced and still very, by the book. He's dressed a little bit more casually. I think he doesn't have a tie on, and he's actually being very cordial and friendly with the students as they come in.
He's got the, his suit jacket holding up over his shoulder, leaning up against the wall type thing going on. Fonzie-esque.
Yeah, just a lot more relaxed.
And I want to point out before you start getting it going here, like I'm alluding to, we all assume a lot happened here.
Yeah, that's true. It would leave you to believe that the way that they ended that last sequence where they were making out, you would think that two adults would not cut it off before it went a little bit further, we'll say.
Yeah, exactly.
But we didn't see anything. All we saw was them kissing. We'll leave it at that for now. Mrs. Krabappel is even in a better mood than she normally is.
There's Ralph, he knows the score.
Krabappel actually cuts class early and lets them all go outside to pick wildflowers.
She's wearing, lipstick and has a little scarf on even. She is completely different.
She feels... Yeah, she's having a very positive vibe about her right now. But as all of the kids run out excitedly, we hear over the intercom...
Cuts fire safety short, Miles. Fire safety!
No one should cut fire safety short. Unless you're going to pick wildflowers. But everybody gets to go have a good time except for Bart, who is once again called over the loudspeaker to go see Skinner in the office. This time, it's just to be a delivery boy, because Skinner gives Bart a note that he wants to give to Krabappel, but warns him not to read it, which of course he immediately does as soon as he leaves the room.
But even Skinner can be like, I hear reading. But he doesn't seem to care.
It's a note inviting Edna to the movies on another date, it would seem, kind of in disguise. They have a plan to meet.
Dear Edna, I want to see more of you. How about another secret rendezvous? Forever yours, Principal Skinner.
And we see that at the movie theaters themselves, Skinner is wearing sunglasses and he's got a hat and Edna's got a scarf on, and they're very much like a spy movie type of meetup where they're not sitting next to each other and they're being super awkward, but then they do finally get side by side. Huh, do you think anyone saw us?
No, it went just as we planned. Except they confiscated my thermos of cola at the door.
Aww. Skinner? Krabappel? What are you two doing here?
Superintendent Chalmers.
Why, we were, here on a field trip. Yeah, a field trip.
With the student.
Yes,
he's purchasing refreshments in the lobby.
I'll go get him right now. And he whispers to Edna, car keys.
They played that, pretty damn smooth, too, on that.
Not too bad,
Good little handoff.
Then Edna is left there to awkwardly chat with Chalmers while we hear in the background Skinner is driving away in the vehicle. And almost immediately after he drives away, we see he returns once again with a very clearly very sleepy Bart Simpson, who looks like he was woken up from bed because he's wearing his pajamas.
But he's got popcorn.
Well, obviously they've got to, give Bart something to pay for his time, I guess. But it's really funny because now Skinner and Krabappel are sitting next to each other, and Bart is sitting next to Chalmers.
Just enjoy the movie. It has Tom Berenger.
Bart clearly does not care about the movie or Tom Berenger, and he just wants to go to sleep. But immediately, I think Chalmers leans over and is like, "Did you know, or do you know if this movie was actually shot in Atlanta?" And Bart's like, "I don't think it matters, man. Just watch."
Good point. Good point.
And he's clearly just like annoyed that he has to be awake at this point.
I think they're going to be over-abusing their situation with Bart here a little bit.
And immediately they continue this trend because on their next date, they need somebody to distract Mrs. Skinner, so they leave Bart with her, which is a fate worse than you should wish on anybody, really. Because Mrs. Skinner wants to show Bart her collection of pictures of cakes. The ones that she clips out of magazines. Now, it all started in 1941 when Good Housekeeping featured a photo of a lovely cake.
You wouldn't happen to have any real cakes around here, would you?
Oh my, no! I don't care for cake. Too sweet. Now, this is called a Lady Baltimore cake. And Bart has probably the worst fate as a child of having to look at pictures of cake while not actually having any cake.
Wait, well, it gets worse because he tries to, expedite the situation.
Well, and he even has to be there to help because she's trying to flip through the pages, but at her age, there's not enough saliva left, so she has to ask Bart to lick her thumb for him. Or for her.
Can I just turn the pages for you?
We hear, and we see Mrs. Skinner slap Bart's hand. No! But you can pick out any pictures you want to take home with you.
Okay, that one.
Slap. No! You can't have that one. That's a coconut cake.
Poor Bartholomew.
Continuing on with that trend, back in class, Bart is still not able to escape this curse that's been placed upon him, basically, because not only does he have to go to the principal's office, he's actually sent there by Miss Krabappel, who says that he's done something wrong and has to go to the principal's office. When he goes, she hands him a note to take to Skinner. And even worse, though, whenever Bart gets back, he's told that he has to say something to Edna, and even under protest, I won't say it.
Bart.
Ugh. I love you, Edna Krabappel. And everybody starts laughing and singing, Bart's gonna marry the teacher. Bart's gonna marry the teacher.
Where are you registered, Simpson?
Thank you, Bart. That was very sweet. Now you may sit down.
You're not gonna get away with this.
And she actually stands up to announce, I'm gonna step out for a few minutes. Martin, you're in charge while I'm gone. And then Martin even roasts Bart. He looks back and says,
Now, Bart, you must promise not to fall in love with me.
And once again, everybody starts laughing. And this is Bart's breaking point. Oh, now Martin's scoring off me? That's it. Listen up, everyone. Follow me. And Bart leads the entire class on parade down the hallway.
The entire school.
Yeah, he's beating on the doors, calling everybody out, and they're all marching down. He's getting every class out there, and he tells everybody, all right, set your faces to stunned. And when he opens the hall closet, it's like the supply closet door, we see Skinner and Krabappel are in there in a complete and total lip lock. And I actually really like, Edna actually pulls down her skirt a little bit. It's up over her knee, not like too high, but you can tell she quickly tries to turn up the modesty, but the skirt immediately pops back up into place.
Which she keeps that look in her eye without moving her head and does it too. It's a really suave little animation moment.
It's really solid animation to say the least. And Skinner, in kind of a panic, is just kind of like, school's dismissed. And with everybody in on the big secret, that brings us to the end of our second act. But once again, this episode actually leaves us with a very long third act. The first act was about 5.5 minutes. The second act is about 7 minutes. And that leaves us still with close to 10 minutes for the third act. But we will once again go ahead and take a very quick break. We'll be back with the conclusion of Grade School Confidential. Hi, I'm Mr. Most Days Off. You might remember me from such podcasts as the 50th Podcast Celebration Show and the Michael Price interview. I've brought a friend along today to talk to you about an exciting new product.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Richie the Whiz Kid.
Miles, did you know that most people have no idea how to get a Best Darn Diddly t-shirt?
You can get a t-shirt with a podcast logo on it?
Well, if you go to tpublic.com/bestdarndiddly, you'll find not only shirts, but also Best Darn Diddly hoodies, posters, mugs, and even phone and laptop cases. It's like they'll put their name on anything.
Help support the Best Darn Diddly Review Show by purchasing any of the crap we put our name on at tpublic.com/bestdarndiddly.
Bye, everybody.
Our third act opens up with Springfield students running all over town telling their parents the big news. First, we see Milhouse say his account of what happened.
And Principal Skinner and Mrs. Krabappel were kissing and swearing.
We also see that Pahusacheda Nahasapima Pedalon, which is Apu's niece, I don't know if I said her first name right there, but she also runs into the Quickie Mart where we see both Apu and Sanjay.
Father, Uncle Apu, a teacher was in a closet with the principal and he had as many arms as Vishnu and they were all very busy.
As you can see so far, each child has their own version of exactly what's happening, including Lisa, who, to be fair, was honest about the fact that she wasn't actually there.
I was in the library at the time, but Janie told me that Principal Skinner and Bart's teacher, Mrs. What's her name?
Krabappel.
Yeah, Krabappel. They were naked in the closet together.
And Marge is clearly upset by this, but Homer is still just sitting there reading the paper and he hasn't reacted yet. Marge is like, oh my goodness.
Wait a minute. Bart's teacher is named Krabappel? I've been calling her Crandall. Why didn't somebody tell me? Oh, I've been making an idiot of myself.
And I love that Homer finds a way to make that news about him. That's wonderful. Finally, we see Ralph Wiggum with arguably the most memorable line of this episode by far, actually. I'd say hands down, but it's his account of what happened.
Mrs. Krabappel and Principal Skinner were in the closet making babies, and I saw one of the babies, and the baby looked at me.
And Chief Wiggum responds, "Wah, the baby looked at you? Huh, Sarah, get me Superintendent Chalmers." And we actually see Mrs. Wiggum dials the number for him. Thank you, Sarah. Which is really funny because he basically treats his wife like a secretary, I guess is the joke. Like if he were at the station, that would be how it would work.
Yeah.
But also, it is noteworthy that it's also noteworthy that this is the first time that Mrs. Wiggum is called Sarah by her first name, according to the director's commentary on this one. I honestly don't know if that's true.
We've never heard her first name.
Okay, then it definitely is.
I'd be willing to bet Miles's career on this.
Nice. Not a lot of risk on this guy's part here. But Superintendent Chalmers does not take this lightly. When Wiggum reports to him, he immediately calls Skinner out.
Skinner! The whole town's in an uproar about your sleazy shenanigans. Now, I'm going to give you a choice. You can either give up this tawdry, fulfilling relationship, or you two will be out here so fast your mortarboards will spin. And where is your mortarboard anyway?
Right here, sir. And we see he actually reaches into his filing cabinet. Now, the mortarboard, for what it's worth, is not a very commonly used term, and they talk about that on the commentary themselves, but it is actually the name of those little square hats that have the tassels hanging off of them that are traditionally used, mostly ceremonially, in the academic fields, essentially. That's what you see during graduations, whenever you see people giving the speeches and all that good stuff. Those are called mortarboards. It's exceptionally funny that you would expect a principal to be wearing one ever. Well, I'm sorry, but I can't give up the woman I love.
Well, then I'm afraid you'll have left me no choice. I want you out the building by 3 o'clock. You're fired. Edna, too.
So we cut to the 4th grade class where Mrs. Krabappel is actually giving a heartfelt speech. Well, it's going to be hard to say goodbye to all of you. We've had a lot of fun together. And as she walks through row by row, Nelson, Nelson, Nelson. How many kids have you beaten up this year?
50?
50. Where does the time go? And she gets weirdly nostalgic about her in-class bullying. Bart is once again called to the principal's office one last time on Skinner's and Edna's relationship's behalf, at least. This time, though, it's they wanted to apologize for all of the awkward situations that they put Bart into.
Which is good, because they were kind of overusing that card, so to speak.
Yeah, they definitely had absolutely zero empathy or respect for Bart at all. And this does show, I mean, like, you can be blinded a lot by love, but I think that this definitely was a good move. And it also set up one of my favorite jokes, honestly, because Bart immediately becomes on Skinner's side again, really. He kind of, like, lost, kind of turned on him a bit because of how much he was being abused. But after the apology, he's like, man, you need to stand up for yourself. Don't just let them kick you out. You fight for who you love.
Okay, Bart.
So immediately he once again is not standing up for himself anyway and letting people run all over him. And immediately after that we hear Edna calling down from above as well, where he's like, come on, Seymour, we've got to get a move on. Or basically he's being commanded around, and immediately his response is,
okay, Edna.
I love this joke so much. It just shows, sadly, Skinner has been trained by his mother just to be so docile, is really what it is.
And yeah, it's after Bart, I believe, points out that, his whole life he's done this with his mom, with Superintendent Chalmers.
Yeah, just this once, man. Stand up for yourself. Okay, Bart. Okay, Edna. But they actually do heed Bart's advice, and they lock up the school, they gather Bart, and they run up to the rooftop where they make an announcement once again, and this time they say that this trio isn't coming down until they get what they want. They just want to have their relationship and keep their jobs. Unfortunately, the only person that's even within earshot is Willie, who's raking leaves, because remember, Skinner already dismissed school earlier, so the schoolyard is empty.
Willie hears ya. Willie don't care.
But Bart has an idea. He calls up Channel 6 and it reports that an octopus has escaped the zoo and has landed itself up on top of Springfield Elementary School, and Kent Brockman immediately sends out 2 cameras for the job. And we immediately see him reporting, so once again, I've been had. But an even more interesting story has developed high atop the 2-story school. A love story. And to Bart's credit, this really did draw a very large crowd.
Skinner, get off my school.
No, you get off of my school.
Homer, Bart's up there.
And Homer actually grabs, they're all talking through a bullhorn, or Chalmers was talking to Skinner through a bullhorn. And Homer actually takes the bullhorn from Chalmers. Give me that. Bart, this is your father. Do you know where the remote is? I looked all over the house.
Did you check your pockets?
And he starts to check his starts to check his pockets, and sure enough, there's the remote. And he starts to say it back through the bullhorn, but it kind of catches himself at Marge. It was in my pocket.
At least he got. I feel like they might have tried to do the whole thing and then realized maybe it like didn't play well. So they just had him do like the first 2 words, maybe? Like,
even better, Richie, even better. Because from the commentary on this one, they said that they tried a lot of things several times in the past when they've had the characters speaking through bullhorns to try to recreate that bullhorn effect. Unfortunately, nothing really seems to work, so they just have their actors record the lines through bullhorns. Who would have thought, right? Well, in this case, this was not only an ad-lib by Dan, but it was the first bullhorn ad-lib done on The Simpsons, because Dan Castellaneta delivered that last line entirely by himself with the partial take through the bullhorn and the immediate correction without the bullhorn. Not scripted at all.
Awesome.
Chief Wiggum decides that he's going to try to use a little bit of reverse psychology, but it very quickly backfires. It does not work at all. So instead, they're going with Plan B, and they're going to blast them with concert volume levels of music and drive them crazy to get them out of the school. Only they choose actual, like, romantic dancing music, I guess you would say, like something you could easily dance to and be considered romantic. Yeah, that sums it up.
Ballroom dancing music.
Yeah, ballroom dancing. It's perfect. And all this does is put Edna and Seymour in a romantic mood where they do, in fact, start dancing. Bart immediately tries to warn them that it's not working, but Wiggum takes it as a sign that it very much is, because it's clearly driving one of them mad. I'll point out again, according to IMDb really quick, this is actually based on a real thing that was a tactic that U.S. troops used during Operation Just Cause, in an attempt to force Manuel Noriega out of the Vatican Embassy in Panama City.
I had heard that this was a historical reference. So good job, Miles, bringing the history into the show. I enjoy that when Wiggum tries to reverse psychology, it's very, very quick. And he's like, okay, don't come out. And Bart's like, okay.
Yeah. Well, that didn't work. And so when Wiggum thinks that the music's working, that tells them that they need to just keep putting on the pressure. So next they're going to hit them with the spotlight. And honestly, this might be one of the most brilliant pieces of animation on The Simpsons so far, and that's really saying something, because this is a very, very good show. But they hit a spotlight into the kitchen, the cafeteria, I should say, of the elementary school, where it directly hits a colander. And because of what a colander is, that's the thing that you use to rinse, like, noodles, like to run water through a strainer, if you're not familiar with the term. And the way it hits, it causes a ballroom lighting effect, and it just adds to the romance. Skinner and Krabappel are now dancing the night away, while Bart is like, just stuck in this situation once more.
It's a very, very well animated scene. There's something about that colander being hit that you always remember that moment in this episode.
It's really pretty, and it's very well done. It appears that Skinner and Krabappel danced until they were exhausted, and actually Bart is even curled up sleeping on the floor beside them. It's kind of a funny little scene, but then we see a phone crash through the window, which I really appreciate that the phone stays on the receiver.
Yeah.
Like it's not a cordless phone, for what it's worth. It's an old school wired telephone.
And the power's been cut too, so they couldn't use the phone on the roof.
Right, they had to throw one through the window. And when Skinner picks it up, it's actually Chalmers who is talking on the other end. But Skinner continues to tell him, "We're not coming down until our jobs are reinstated and you acknowledge and celebrate our love."
No one would like to celebrate your love more than I, but I'm a public servant and not permitted to use my own judgment in any way.
Another great joke. At this point, Krabappel actually takes the phone from Skinner. "Then let us take our case directly to the townspeople."
Oh, yeah, that'll be real productive. Who do you want me to talk to first? The guy with the bumblebee suit or the one with the bone through his hair?
Of course he's referring to Bumblebee Man and Sideshow Mel. I love this joke so much because Chalmers is such a grounded character, and the idea that he kind of calls out the absurdity in Springfield right here is really, really wonderful. And Mel even gets a little bit mad. "My opinions are as valid as the next man's."
Yeah, alright. Just come on down. You know, I gotta say, Miles, with this podcast, Yeah, I've talked about in the past, like, having much more love for, like, Flanders and Burns. But I definitely think the Chalmers love is also one of the ones that's, like, skyrocketing more so than it was when I was a child. It's just, there's something about the, like you just said, the groundedness of Chalmers and playing the absurd off of him and him having to be, like, the straight guy a lot is just, like, it's really, really made me like his character a lot more. I always enjoyed him, but, like, even more so now.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And it is really fun getting to see these side characters and how they develop over time throughout the seasons.
Right.
They come up with a plan to get in front of the townspeople. Bart, I think, once again, had to have had a play in this because Skinner walks out saying that he's got a bomb strapped to his chest and that he demands their attention, though Chief Wiggum is very quickly able to identify that that's not a bomb. Those are just hot dogs. Armor hot dogs. And there's a line here that is another reference to that commercial that we've talked about many, many times before. They really love to reference Armor hot dogs on the show, and especially the old jingle. But Chalmers, I think, says about Skinner, like, what kind of man would wear Armor hot dogs? And the commercial is what type of kids like Armor hot dogs.
Nice.
Yeah, it's fun.
I like that here in a second when Skinner and Krabappel are talking, you'll see Santa's little helper run by the screen with the hot dogs in his mouth.
Nice, I didn't catch that. That's wonderful. Krabappel is now being encouraging to her man. Just speak from the heart, Seymour. Tell him how we brought a little happiness into each other's lives. Ask them why they're forcing two dedicated people to choose between their careers and their hearts. But Maud Flanders actually jumps in. Excuse me, Edna. I don't think we're talking about love here. We're talking about sex in front of the children.
Sex cauldron? I thought they closed that place down.
And Krusty gets very excited about apparently the club that he very much misses.
Or the actual cauldron.
But of course, Maud spelled out sex in front of the children, is of course the joke here. But Skinner immediately declares, this is absurd. I did not have relations in that closet. And the fact is, I haven't,
Yes?
And Krabappel at this point says, Seymour, I think you better tell them. It's the only way to clear our names. So Skinner goes on to say, well, everyone, the fact is, I haven't ever had relations. I'm a virgin. Ha ha!
Hey, does this mean that Mrs. Krabappel is a virgin too?
Ha! And actually, I'm calling that my favorite joke in the episode. Fuck it. That laugh from Edna Krabappel is so funny. It's just an off-screen laugh, but it's very distinct. And Chalmers decides, clearly no 44-year-old man is going to admit that in front of everyone, and Krusty backs him up.
Oh yeah, that's for sure.
I'm inclined to agree.
Ach, I'll never look at him the same again.
That was more than I wanted to know.
Okay, well, Edna, Seymour, in light of these, revelations, I, suppose we, overreacted.
So do we have our jobs back?
What? Oh, yeah, sure. Just, keep the lewdness to a minimum. And then he sprints off, like, Chalmers straight sprints off. He doesn't walk away.
So it would seem like everything's mostly back to normal here. Not quite yet, though, because Bart says, well, I'm out of here. Skinny, Krabby, catch you later.
Hold on, Bart. May we have a word with you? We want to thank you for helping us through a difficult period.
Oh, no problemo. So I guess now you'll be getting married or something? Huh?
Well, actually, Seymour and I have decided to break up.
Huh?
We can't continue on like this, trying to build a private relationship in public, the whole town watching our every move with a fine-tooth comb. I'm used to humiliation, but not in front of a crowd that size.
Aw, but you seem like such a good couple.
Bart, when you get a little older, you're going to learn that sometimes romances don't turn out exactly the way you'd like them to.
And Bart looks genuinely disappointed as he walks away from the school that all of this drama and it ends up back to where we started with the classic Simpsons reset. Except, as we see Skinner and Edna walk back into the school while Bart walks away. We hear a little private conversation between the two of them. That's why I love elementary school, Edna. The children believe anything you tell them. And we see them bust out a bottle of champagne, and they go to their old spot where it all started, the janitor's closet. Well, I guess that would have been the little treehouse, but
yeah.
Their hookup spot in the school is the janitor's closet, and that's where we end the episode, with them enjoying a bottle of champagne together in the janitor's closet. We fade to black with romantic music once again swelling up over the credits. That brings us to the end of the episode, Grade School Confidential.
Yay!
Richie, once again, was there anything that you or that book of yours want to talk about before we end this podcast?
Well, the compendium, I always forget how to say it, that we use, The Simpsons, A Complete Guide to Our Favorite Family, points out that Lisa has a Krusty the Clown lunchbox. So, sometimes she goes a little girly on certain things, but that Krusty fandom's always going to suck you back in. So it's good to see her carrying a Krusty lunchbox. It also points out that the movie theater had air conditioning, and they posted that on the sign outside the movie theater. And
a movie theater without air conditioning would be the worst.
Oh my gosh, yes. And the last thing I want to point out is there was a sign about the permanent records room saying if you break in here, it'll be posted on your permanent record. So I thought that was that was funny. But other than that, this episode definitely feels like a Josh and Bill episode, more so to me because I felt like there was absolutely no B plot in this one. They had enough. They always like telling stories and always have enough time to tell their stories, but there is no B plot in the story that I can think of. And it's. I feel like I enjoy the episodes more that don't have B plots.
I mean, really, the only thing you could argue was even remotely a B plot would be Martin's birthday party, and that was really a catalyst for the event than anything else.
There was no side story going on to me.
Right, that was threaded through the main story. You're absolutely right. Yeah, very, very true. And actually, since you brought it up, on that note, with this being a very Bill and Josh episode, and I agree, it does feel that way. They also talked about on the commentary how at this time they were wanting to explore the auxiliary characters of the Simpsons universe, but they always felt that they needed to at least in some way ground the show back to the family itself. But really, the only character that has any real representation in this episode is Bart. Very little to do with the parents, very little to do with Lisa and Maggie. Bart is the only character that has any prominent role in this story at all, and it felt very organic. Like, it did not feel like they were, forcing Bart into this plot so that it was still about The Simpsons. It just really made sense that he would find himself in that spot. So I thought that was really interesting. Two more facts from IMDb, and then we'll call it a day. One was just simply that this is one of many sieges that we've already seen on Springfield Elementary School. There's also episodes Bart Stops to Smell the Roosevelt, Skinner Sense of Snow, and Skinner Sense of Snow had actually started as a weather emergency. The other two were actually some sort of an agenda after losing a job and trying to get it back, those types of things. The other thing about this episode I'll point out is that this is actually the start of the first long-term relationship that Edna has on screen. You pointed out that this episode doesn't really have the true Simpsons reset like a lot of the episodes do, and that's because Skinner and Edna's relationship actually is kind of a thread line throughout additional episodes moving forward.
Yeah.
She will, of course, eventually break up with Skinner, and her second long-term relationship is with Ned Flanders that actually ends all the way, spoiler alert, when Marcia Wallace passes away and Edna is no longer a character on the show, which is obviously very sad, but I think it's really neat that a character that essentially started as the town slut, for lack of a better, that was kind of how she was featured, especially in I remember the sushi episode, where she was in the back and whatnot. There's definitely some jokes where when she was a smaller rolled character, she was the promiscuous teacher, and that was really her sole role. But the fact that character became so prominent on the show that she in fact got two storylines that went a long-term relationship, I think that's really neat.
Very well put. I would agree with all that, and this is the first time I can remember where they actually take a storyline and continue the thread because it doesn't reset. So that, I mean, and heck, we're going to get another storyline with Skinner next season. It's going to continue on slightly. So
a very major Skinner storyline that we definitely have those things.
It didn't actually happen, so it's minor. So don't worry about it.
But for now, that is going to do it for this week's Best Darn Diddly review show. Once again, always want to thank you so much for tuning in and downloading this podcast. It means the absolute world to us. Please make sure you take a moment and follow Richie online at thewiz_kid23.
Make sure you follow Miles at Mr. Most Days Off. And most importantly, make sure you follow our show at Best Darn Diddly. That's DIDDLY.
Please come back again next week when Richie and I will once again be handling the task of going through each and every Simpsons episode. And oh boy, is it another good one. We're going to be reviewing the K9 Mutiny.
Oh, it's dogs. Miles is going to be all over that one. Oh, hey, Miles, that episode next week. Is that the one with Miles and Richie where they're in the closet making babies and we see one of the babies and the baby looks at us?
I sure hope so, Richie. And until next time, be cromulent to each other.